Welcome to the Global Investor Podcast, a show that focuses on helping foreign investors enter the lucrative U.S. real estate market. Host Charles Carillo combines decades of real estate investing experience with a professional background in international banking to interview experts in all areas of U.S. real estate investing. Now, here's your host, Charles Carillo.
So welcome to another episode of the Global Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Carillo. Today we have Kevin Bupp. Kevin has been investing in real estate for 16 years and is the founder and CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors. They invest in mobile home parks, parking lots, apartments, offices, and single-family homes across the U.S. So thank you so much for being on the show, Kevin.
Yeah, Charles, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Awesome. Yeah, well, you have a very interesting story about how you got into mobile home investing, and you started in real estate investing and multifamily. Can you give us a little background on yourself, both personally and professionally, before getting involved in real estate investing?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me here. So it actually even starts, I'll go back a little bit further, multifamily, because I went through the stages that a lot of folks go through when they first get started. And I started with single family because that's what a mentor that I met back when I was 19 years old. That's what he did. He did single family and small multifamily where, in Pennsylvania, in a small town where I grew up. And so I've always been of the mind, don't try to reinvent the wheel, right? Just if there's something that's proven that works, just go ahead and model after that. And so that's essentially what I did. It took me about a year and a half to buy my first property after essentially being mentored by this individual, like outside of going to school and tending bar in the evenings to kind of make ends meet. I was working for free as an intern, whatever you want to call it. Basically, I was trying to be around, same with David, as much as possible so I could learn his business and what it was he was doing and how he was making money. And again, bought my first property about a year and a half thereafter. I was 20 years old, and it was a single family property. And, for the first couple of years of my investing career, I didn't have a lot of money. I literally had $7,000 in the bank I'd saved up tending bar. And that's what I used, that along with a private lender I'd met, helped me fund that first property. And I realized very quickly I was out of money. And it was, David's model was buy and hold. And I realized very quickly that couple $100 a month positive cash flow, it was going to take me a long time to be able to buy the next property. And I used every penny I had to do that first one. And so what I really turned my model into, Charles, was buy 3 properties, wholesale 2 of them, keep 1. Buy 3 properties, wholesale 2 of them, keep 1. I mean, sometimes it changed. I had a wholesale 5, then I'd keep 1. But bottom line is I would wholesale as much as I could to stack some money, and then I would keep 1 whenever I had enough additional liquidity to continue buying and wholesaling more. And so that model carried on for a couple of years. And then I moved down to Florida from Pennsylvania, and I met a lot of folks that were doing much bigger things. I mean, bigger than my small town, Pennsylvania. And they really opened my eyes to the world of private lending. Although I had a private lender up in Pennsylvania, it was a very different beast when I moved down here to Florida. Lots of additional opportunities, a much bigger marketplace, many more investors making big things happen. And so I just, I went back to modeling those that were doing bigger things and doing it right. And so I built a very large portfolio of single family properties, slowly transitioned into multifamily properties. This is all prior to 2008 crash, and built a very large rental portfolio. Fast forward, 2008 was a very much a struggle for that, and a couple years there following. Lost a lot of the portfolio that I had built, and started a few other businesses outside of real estate just to keep the roof over my head. And the fire never went away in real estate. I was in damage control for a couple of years, but the fire never stopped burning. And in 2011, I finally acknowledged that fire, and I decided to really do a self-reflection on what had worked and what didn't work, what I would do differently moving forward. And I realized very quickly that single family just was not an efficient business model. It worked well for the time I did it. On paper, I had built up a big net worth, and it went away very quickly, but it was just a very inefficient business model. And it took a lot of effort and energy to build a substantial portfolio in that space. Back then, prior to the crash, I was single, I wasn't married. Moving forward, I got married in 2010. We were talking about having kids. And so I had to do things in a little bit more efficiently moving forward. And multifamily seemed to be the answer. That seemed to be the way to rebuild very quickly at a much larger scale, much quicker. And just really during that kind of journey of taking that next step, or the first step in the second phase of my professional career, I was introduced to mobile home parks, and just very accidentally, just like most things that happen in our lives, as long as you're present and you're aware and you're conscious, good things will come your way, and you just have to be able to acknowledge them when they present themselves. And this was through by a gentleman named Randy. It was a mutual friend. Randy had been a banker for 30 years, bought 3 mobile home parks after he retired, and I was introduced to my mutual friend, and I just went and had lunch with Randy with no interest in his business. I had no interest, Charles, in mobile home parks at all. I just enjoy expanding my network and meeting new people. And met with Randy for 2 hours, and he couldn't stop talking about how great mobile home parks were. He piqued my interest in many different ways of all the different aspects of why they are kind of a superior investment to many of the other types of real estate out there. And I like every type. You can make money in every type of real estate asset class, but he then just kept pouncing on mobile home parks and how great they were. And so honestly, so much that I was so intrigued and energized by our 2-hour lunch meeting that I left the meeting, and I kind of committed myself internally to, I'm going to learn everything I can about this, and I'm going to go buy one in the next year. I'm going to buy a mobile home park here in the next 12 months, and I'm going to either prove how great they are or prove how bad they are, right? One or the other. And that's what happened. That was the first one. It took me 14 months, a little bit longer than what I anticipated. I missed out on a couple of deals along the way because I got cold feet, and bought the first one back in 2012. And that was up in Atlanta, Georgia. I still own that one today. And fast forward now, we've got parks in 13 different states, and we've been doing it for going on a decade. It's been 8 years, and that is our core competency. That's what we spend almost all of our time on, and outside of a few other investments, but that is what we do. That's our business as a whole.
So your company invests, like you said, in a number of different asset classes. What is the current investment strategy for Sunrise Capital when you're looking at these properties? So you're focusing on mobile home parks, and how are you also how are you finding them as well? Is it a lot direct to owner or brokers?
Yeah, and the first question about us investing in many different property types. Now, just to get some clarity, we only really specialize in mobile home parks, and just very recently just started acquiring parking assets, so parking lots and parking garages. But that's a very new part of our business. Mobile home parks, that is the core. I personally own a number of passive investments in many different types of asset classes: self-storage, medical office, retail, multifamily. But those aren't what we do as a business. That's okay. Very, very passive. Our active part of our business is mobile home parks and parking. And so as far as how we find them, we for many years we most of the things that we purchased were direct to owner. Mobile home parks, the mobile home park world has changed a lot over the past 8 years since we've been in it, meaning that it was very much under the radar 8 years ago, even up until about 3 years ago. It was very under the radar. Not many large institutional players. It wasn't the next hottest thing. It was just kind of it was a good old boy network. Like if you bought a park and you knew it was doing well, like you didn't, not that you didn't share the word. It's just most people didn't even want to hear it, right? Like It's not as sexy as multifamily. It's not as sexy as shopping centers and pretty much any other asset class. It's just not sexy, right? And so most people would normally just snub their nose and not give it the time of day. That's very much changed. It's done a 180-degree turn. Now it is. It's a major asset class, and there's lots of competition, lots of bigger buyers and what have you. And so back to the original answer I was looking to give is how we used to find them and how we still do, but about 80 to 90% of what we did up until a year or two ago was direct to owner. So we do a lot of cold calling. Direct mail used to work really well. It doesn't work as well anymore, but cold calling is probably our number one way of acquiring opportunities. And it's not just a one cold call. It's we take the same role as a broker might. We identify particular parks, build relationships with the owners, and stay in contact with them for a very long period of time. A lot of times our deal cycle could last 2 to 3 years, from the time we have a first point of contact to when we actually buy their property, if we do buy it. And then on the flip side of that, brokers, they're a key component of our business as well. So, they're out there pounding the pavement all day long and looking for opportunities, and we'll come across ones that we might be missing on, right? And so both of those ways are the primary ways that deals come our way.
Interesting. How is the financing with it? We have all this kind of, we call it gold standard, like agency debt, right? With multifamily. How does that work with mobile home parks? Yeah,
that's a great question. And up until 5 years ago, I would say that It was very challenging. It could be challenging to get parks financed. Now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have been in our space for many years. However, their if you look back 5 years, their criteria was very strict. Like they would literally only lend on the creme de la creme. I mean, like it had to be a 5-star community, all double wide homes, paved streets, 2-car parking pad, sheds. I mean, like it had to be a premium community, which only represents a small percentage of those throughout the U.S., right? 5-star classification. And over the years, they've come to find that mobile home parks are a great asset to lend on. They've got a really low default rate. They had, the lowest default rate aside from self-storage during the downturn of 2008. And so over time, Fannie and Freddie have both gotten a lot more lenient with their lending. And so there's lots of opportunity to get the gold standard of debt on a property, assuming that it's stabilized and it's in a good market and it's a good quality asset. It doesn't have to be a 5-star. They'll lend on things even down to like a 3-star. So, and then aside from Fannie and Freddie, again, that's really speaking more to like a stable community. More for the value add plays. There's plenty of different local and regional and national lenders, banks that will lend on mobile home parks. There's life companies, that will lend on mobile home parks. You got bridge lenders, and then you also got CMBS that will lend on mobile home parks. So there's lots of lending options out there. It just really depends on the asset itself. What current condition it's in, how good are the financials, is it stable, is it distressed, the market it's located in, lots of different factors. Again, just like very, very similar to multifamily.
Right. Yeah, you'll find someone to lend you money on it if you found the right deal, and
yes,
if
exactly.
If you want to pay all, the interest rate, which is very interesting. Is the older I get, the more it's important to me for finding businesses that have moats around it. And I remember my dad was a multifamily investor, and someone brought to him. I remember I was in like middle school or something. He brought a junkyard, auto salvage yard to him to sell to him. And I was like, "Why, Dad, would you want this?" And he's like, "You can't build any more of them." And I never thought about that. And it's something with mobile home parks is very similar. No one wants a mobile home park in their backyard. No one wants a salvage yard in their backyard. So how are new parks? Are there new parks being built in the U.S.? I imagine they're for those, like you said, 5-star. How is that today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, mobile home parks are the one asset class that is the only asset class that have a declining supply, right? And so there's more parks that are being torn down or redeveloped than that are coming new onto market. And so there are, I don't know the number that new parks that get built each and every year, but I can tell you that the ones that are getting built are very high quality. They're not your typical, run-of-the-mill affordable housing, workforce housing. I mean, they're really nice communities because you got to deal with a couple things. You got to deal with the not in my backyard syndrome, right? Like the whole like I don't want that built next to my house, and so like it's. In fact, I've got a close friend that's building a community now. Like they just broke ground a couple months ago up in Washington State, but it's a gorgeous community. I mean, it's got a playground, it's got a pool, it's got a clubhouse, it's all double wides. These double wides start at like $190,000. I mean, it's affordable in that market, but it's also equivalent to entry level housing, right? As far as like very similar to what a stick built might go for, and in that same range. And it looks like a stick built community. And so you've got that to contend with. And then in addition to that, you've got municipalities, right? Like as far from a taxing standpoint, mobile home parks take up a lot of horizontal space, lots of ground there that they cover. And the tax base that a municipality might expect from one is very minimal, right? Like the improved land itself, there's not a lot of improvements, not the same as that would go into a 3-story apartment complex or a mixed-use property. That same footprint could typically in a densely populated area or in a largely populated municipality the tax base could be much higher in just about any other use than that of a mobile home park. And so you got that that to contend with as well. And so a lot of times municipalities might have another reason of why they're not approving it, but a lot of times it really comes down to money. Like what's the best use of that land, and what's going to benefit them the most from a tax perspective. In addition, the people that live there, who's going to spend the most money in our area, in our town, in our city? Is it the people that live in the mobile home park, or the people that live in a class apartment complex, right? So you got all that to contend with. And so very few get built on a regular basis. And the ones that do are very, not high end, but like they're much more akin to a subdivision, a single family subdivision, than that of a mobile home park, workforce housing type arrangement.
Yeah. Yeah, that perfectly makes sense when they're doing like the subdivision plat maps and stuff. They want to make sure that the people coming in there are going to be spending money and adding to the tax base.
That's right.
Their highest and best use of property. What's your strategy when you're purchasing a property? Then are you say you're purchasing so many a park, and do you want to make sure that you own the actual homes? Do you want to own some of them? Do you want to own none of them? How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well. And, in a perfect world, we wouldn't own any of the homes, right? Like and that's one of the attractions to this business is when you just own the mobile home park, the residents own the homes themselves. When there's an issue with the roof or the plumbing or the AC or anything whatsoever that has to do with that unit, they're not calling us. They're calling a vendor to take care of it because it's their unit, right? So very similar to that of a homeowner. That's what they are. They own their home. They just happen to be renting the land underneath their home. And so again, in a perfect world, that's how it goes. And that's how that's how mobile home parks were built way back in the day. If you built it, they would come, and a developer could just build the infrastructure. And back then there was a lot more, many more consumer debt options available for the end consumer that wanted to buy a mobile home and move it into a community. And so, a lot of developers couldn't build these communities fast enough. And so like you build it, it got filled up. And then that model has really changed over time. A couple of reasons is, the big one is there's not, the debt's not the most attractive for the consumer side. And so if that individual actually has really good credit, more than likely they probably could go disqualify for a stick-built home, And so if you got someone that's got a 680 plus credit score, there's other options for them. And so the ones that fall into the lower end bracket of credit scores that are looking for that more affordable option, they might be paying a 10 or 11 or 12% interest rate, what have you. And so again, just not as many options for consumers to buy a retail home and move it into a community. And so with that being said, what occurs a lot is when we purchase a community, a couple different scenarios ultimately could play out. There's many communities we've taken over where, maybe it started off as 100% homes were owned by the homeowners. And then over time, maybe someone passed away and their heirs didn't want that home. And so now just by circumstance, the community acquires that home. They have a choice to either rent it or sell it. Sell it to another end buyer. Some community owners decide to rent them and they end up acquiring a number of them. Others, the smarter ones, decide to sell it and kind of keep it as a tenant-owned home community. Now, the flip side of that is you've got a lot of communities as well that you'll find there's vacant lots. And so I might give you an example, a 100-space community. Maybe sometime over the years, people moved, but that owner never proactively helped more people, attracted more people back into the community. And so you got, let's say 20 empty lots. They're fully developed. They've got infrastructure. Well, there's not good consumer debt available. So not many people are moving their homes in. And so the only way you can fill those lots up, because you want to increase the revenue of that community. And so you want to get homes on those lots, is for the owner of the park to actually go buy homes, to go physically buy either new or used mobile homes and bring them in. And then again, you have that same decision of, do you want to sell them or do you want to rent them? And it really depends on the marketplace and what have you, of which one is the best business model for that particular community. And so with that being said, we own about 2,000 lots today, and about 10% of our inventory, not by choice, about 10% of our inventory is made up of homes that we own, homes that we have to fix the AC, do turnovers on. It's just, it's not as attractive a business model for us as it is to just rent the dirt out.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So 2020 has been a very turbulent time for U.S. between COVID, the economy, riots, everything else that's going on. How has it affected your portfolio, and how is your company maneuvering going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can tell you that I think I'm not alone when I say that I lost a lot of sleep in mid-March, leading into April, not knowing exactly how not just our residents, but just, residents in general, multifamily, residential, retail, all the above, right? How they were going to respond and how they were going to manage this, catastrophe that was happening. And, thankfully the stimulus plan kicked in. And so a lot of our residents that might have been out of work or lost a source of income, a lot of them, not just ours, but again, across the board, have been able to receive, unemployment benefits and then some additional benefits on top of that are pretty substantial, at least, especially in the world of workforce housing. A lot of our residents might be making more money, or they were making more money on unemployment than that of maybe their job. And so I think that definitely that curbed the bleeding substantially. I mean, our collections were down a little bit, on average 2 to 3%, but that was across the board. So some communities were better than others. We had many communities that had no delinquencies whatsoever, and then others we had an uptick. And so, but generally speaking, things have been great. Things have been great, and we proactively worked with all our residents. I mean, we set up a dedicated COVID-19 hotline where we literally took one of our staff, and that's all her job was for 3 months, is doing workout plans and making sure that we overly communicated, saying, hey, if you think you're not going to be able to pay, please let us work with you. We do not want to displace you. We don't want to, have you lose your home, what have you. And so we just tried to be incredibly proactive and just be there and listen and offer options for the residents that needed the help. And so up until this point, Charles, things have been fine. But I will say that I do have concerns with, and not just for our industry, I'd say any residential landlord, anyone that's in that business of renting residential properties. I do think I think there will be some pain felt. Whenever the time comes when the stimulus, I know they haven't figured out phase 2 of it yet, exactly how much it's going to be. And they're still working through that. And so we're already starting to create this delta, that's probably creating some angst and anguish and pain, with people that are out of work. But whatever that kicks back in, and again, that will be another Band-Aid. But whenever that really does run out, whenever the stimulus runs out and people stop receiving the additional unemployment benefits, because the standard unemployment benefits, they're not enough to really live. I mean, they're just not. And so whenever that ends, I think that's when, the real test will become who can truly pay the rent. Because I think at that point in time, we'll probably find ourselves in 10, 11% unemployment rates, right? I mean, there will be jobs that no longer exist that these people cannot go back to, right? So that's where my concern lies, not just for us, but for you and for everyone else that's in rental real estate. I think that's where the pain truly comes to light.
Yeah, I don't think it's, like you said, I don't think it's going to come to light until then. And we have no idea at the end of where we are at the end of 2020, before the election. So many stuff is going to be happening in this last quarter of 2020. And we'll just really see how stable properties are and how stable tenants are at that point. So it's just working with them, like you said, which is the best way for everybody involved. Yeah. So,
and I think if you have a job, if you have tenants, if they have a job where they have the ability to work from home, then I think that they're much safer, right? I mean, because, but if it's a job, if they're in the service industry, if they're they're waiters, waitresses, or just work in the retail space that's getting, there's layoffs left and right, stores are shutting down. If there's any type of service related industry that you physically have to be present, those are obviously the industries that are getting just clobbered right now. And those are the ones that more than likely there will not be a job to go back to. And so a lot of that's going to relate to probably more workforce housing and possibly even up to maybe B class, B minus. And so I do think that, I know that normally the A class is what a lot of people say, gets hammered the hardest, right? There's this trickle down effect. And I'm not sure I necessarily think that will play out given the current circumstances. And so a lot of the A class folks, a lot of the white collar individuals have the ability to work from home. Most of them have the ability to work from a laptop. And so I think a lot of those jobs have a lot more flexibility than that of someone that might be making $12 to $14 an hour or working as a waiter or server, bartender, what have you. So I'm not an economist. I don't know, but that's just common sense to me. Seems like those are the folks that are going to have the hardest trouble, and then A class are going to have a little bit easier time.
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll see how the rest of the year pans out and how the rest of COVID pans out for what they're going to do. But so what do you think are the main factors that have contributed to your success, Kevin?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think a big one for me, just knowing how my brain works, knowing everyone's got weaknesses, right? Everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. And I think the sooner you can identify what each of those are and be honest with yourself, the faster you'll get further along, right? The faster you'll grow as an individual. And, for me, it's been focus. I've always been one to preach on, pick a lane and stick with it and forget all the other noise. And when I say lane, I mean like an asset class, right? Pick what you're going to do and focus on it and take the time, take the years it's going to take you to master it and become the best at it before looking at any other shiny object that there's going to be hundreds of them flying by you, right? All the time. You're always going to see, especially with social media now, right? Like there's not a day you can't jump on a Facebook feed and see someone holding a check up for like a closing they had or a refinance or something like that, or a deal they just bought. And so stick in your lane and just focus and put the time in that it takes to master a particular area of your business. And again, if you're getting started, pick an asset class and stick with it before you think about even pivoting or adding another. Like for us, we stuck with mobile home parks for darn near 8 years before we even considered. We considered about 3 years ago of looking at parking. It's always been an asset class we've always been intrigued by. It's very much aligned with what we already do, but we know that as soon as you start turning your head, that's when things start going wrong with your present business, right? Like you start losing focus. And so it took us a long time before we felt comfortable with our systems and processes and the team we had before we'd even consider not pivoting, but just adding another asset class to our business.
Nice. How are you guys finding those assets? And I mean, is that the same thing? Direct mail, brokers?
Very similar way. The parking sector is very fragmented, very much like mobile home parks probably were like a decade or two ago, with very few large professional operators in the space, lots of mom and pops. And so, direct mail and cold calling has been, the number one way. There's not really it's such a fragmented industry and niche that there's really only a few brokers in the country that even are the, specialists in parking lots. And so, even in mobile home parks, there's, no less than 100 brokers that is their core business, of brokering mobile home parks. But parking lots, again, I can count on one hand the brokers I know of that actually advertise as being parking specialist. It's very few. Yeah.
Interesting. So tell us about you. You have a podcast. Can you tell us about your podcast or podcasts? I didn't know if you had multiple ones.
Yeah. No, actually have two. And so my primary podcast is called Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. I've been doing it for 6.5 years now. And it's a commercial real estate investing show where we basically interview owners and operators, professionals that represent every different asset class. And so, folks like you, Charles, that do multifamily, just had a retail guy on yesterday, interviewed a self-storage guy the day before that. And we've covered literally the span of every asset class you can think of, including some very niche ones such as marinas, parking lots. I just interviewed a guy a couple of months ago that the largest bowling alley owner in the United States, which is still a business. I mean, he's doing well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Again, there's a million different ways to make money in real estate. And so that's what that show is all about. And then I've also got the Mobile Home Park Investing podcast, which, as the name might say, it's all about mobile home park investing.
Well, awesome. Well, how can our listeners learn more about you and your business? Obviously, we have your podcast, but for your Sunrise business?
Yeah. So if you have an interest in what we're doing in the mobile home park space, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com is our website. And then if you want to reach out to me and just learn more about me and what I've got going on, you can just go to my website, which is kevinbupp.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on today. Have a great rest of your day, and looking forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thanks for having me, Charles. It's been a lot of fun.
Talk to you soon. Hi guys, it's Charles from the Global Investors Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're interested in getting involved with real estate, but you don't know where to begin, set up a free 30-minute strategy call with me at schedulecharles.com. That's schedulecharles.com. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Global Investor Podcast. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play to get new weekly episodes. For more resources and to receive our newsletter, please visit globalinvestorpodcast.com. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode.
Nothing in this episode should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Any investment opportunities mentioned on this podcast are limited to accredited investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure, subscription documentation, and are subject to all applicable laws. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Harborside Partners Incorporated exclusively.